Welcome to this webinar. It's being brought to you by The Leap. They're an organisation that supports arts and culture, but they're doing things in different ways. They work directly with communities and seek to build knowledge, skills and confidence, offering both financial and non-financial support. They're all about developing a community-led culture. And in this webinar, we're going to help you learn more about income generation strategies and, as part of that, achieving funding success. So let's get started. So how are you going to make the most of this session and why is it important? We believe that having a mixed income generation strategy is fundamental and really key to making sure that you sustain your activities, your projects or your organisation. So whatever stage you're at, this is a topic that's going to be important. There are different methods and approaches that you might take to gaining income, resources and sustaining what you do. And we're going to be looking at the range of options out there. And although we'd never encourage people to become funding reliant, funding and fundraising are often a key element and a key way to create community-led ventures. Accessing different types of funds, going to your community to raise those funds are all part of the cocktail of making your income stack up and making those resources work for the projects and the activities you want to run. So we're going to cover your income generation cocktail. What might that look like and how can you optimize opportunities from multiple sources? We're hoping that you'll understand 5 key methods of generating income and different kinds of resources that will help you with your ideas, your project or growing an organisation. And we'll also be including a range of tips for achieving bid success. So, income generation cocktails. Some of these terms you may be familiar with, some of them that you may not. We're just going to walk through what these are. And you can be having a think about your own experiences and your own examples as we walk through these options. You will find a downloadable sheet as part of this webinar that you can be doodling on and writing your own examples of how you might be generating income now or where you might want to generate income from in the future. So do use that tool. And it's a case of thinking about what your short-term and long-term priorities are. You know, what you might do and how you might generate income in the short term could be quite different for how you would in the long term once you recognise and realise how your project's evolving, what it's worth, what the wider community or different markets or different parts of your community or different audiences might pay for the activities, the events, the consultancy, the various things that you might do. And so thinking about who your key partners, stakeholders and customers might be are also important in thinking about how you're going to generate income. So let's have a look at these points in turn. So initially, trading. Trading is one of the most obvious ones, selling products and services. We're all part of buying, we're all customers of something, and there are lots of different community organisations, arts and culture organisations that rather than rely on funds, grants, commissions or project work alone, look to package up what it is they do or additional add-on aspects to what they do, and they sell these items or these things or these spaces to generate additional income, either as part of the core aspect to generating their income or as an additional element. A couple of quick examples here that might spark your thoughts. There's Cowherds there. There's an organisation that initially started up over in Salford. They set up a vegan cafe, working with communities around nutrition and around healthy eating and wanting to promote veganism as a healthy way to eat food and source food and grow food. And eventually they ended up creating their own product of juices. So it's just, they didn't start in that place. It was something that they evolved to, and it's something that they developed as a tradable product after a number of years of operating. And likewise with a range of arts, culture, events and organisations, whilst you might have the core aspect of what you do as something arts and culture based, you might actually be selling refreshments or trading off something else to help bring an additional income for what it is you do. So that's in there. The picture where everybody's sat around outside in a lovely space, That's a social enterprise, a not-for-profit profit garden centre, and this garden centre sells plants and it does all sorts of arts and cultural events and activities in this community-led garden centre. But one of the key ways it makes money, in addition to the plants and the horticulture stuff, is through selling space. So depending on where you operate from, how you run, what you do, whether you happen to have your own venue or building, renting your space out to other people, other groups, is something that's an option as a part of a trading model. But also at this particular garden centre, they run staff team building and away days. And so if you've got arts, culture, drama, um, storytelling, creative writing, whatever the skills are that are within your project right now, those might be a tradable service or a tradable product in future to different kinds of audiences beyond who you're immediately working with, where you can generate income from private businesses or the corporate sector or from schools or wider community organisations to bring in additional income for what you do simply by using the skill set you've got and packaging it up for a different market or a different audience. There's other examples of cafes here where people as not-for-profit cafes selling great nutritious food to complement other work that they do. There might be apps. I've thrown an app in there. This is an app that's all about um, food and recycling food to make sure it doesn't go in, or selling food on before it goes off so that it doesn't go into landfill and so that people can get affordable meals. And the principles there just that they use a particular app that they've developed that connects the restaurants and the food industry into the general public sort of audience, so that at the end of the day, people can scroll through and see what food's available near them that they might want to buy cheaply, or maybe it's being given away for free. And so it creates lots of social impact and benefits through what it does and through the work that you're doing when you've developed certain products, or if you're connected to different arts and cultural spaces and there's tickets going, or there's events that are out there. How are you using digital technology and can you commercialise that is a question perhaps to throw out there for now or for the future as you evolve your project. And you've got a picture of my shiny face and somebody called Vic Turnbull there speaking into a mic, but there's also that self-brand and that self-image, and selling yourself and your own knowledge and skills. So I sell my consultancy skills, I deliver workshops, my specialist knowledge and expertise is something that people buy in. And likewise, for all of you creative practitioners, community artists, people with specialist knowledge out in communities, in theatre, in film and TV, who knows, there's a lot of knowledge and skills that you will have that are potentially a saleable commodity as an additional income generation tool in your cocktail. So don't underestimate the value of your own knowledge and skill sets, perhaps where that could be sold in the future, as a day rate, somebody who designs and delivers workshops, somebody who's bought in to deliver specialist pieces of project work, consultancy or research, to help stack up the sustainability of the work that you're doing going forward. And me again was just another aspect where it was somebody who was a hairdresser. She's trained as a hairdresser and a holistic therapist, and that was her core career. But over time, she decided to support people who were affected by cancer. She hadn't been through cancer herself, but a lot of her clients had been affected by cancer, and she set up a not-for-profit organisation that ran events and creative arts activities and little retreats where people who were living with cancer could start to feel more like themselves again through accessing health activities, peer support, creative activities to boost their self-esteem, boost their mental health and connect them to other people. But the trading element of what she did was selling wigs. So although there were coffee mornings and events and activities and speakers and different health and wellbeing sessions out in the community, to help sustain the project and help sustain the enterprise, selling therapies and selling wigs helped bring in income to save for having to write funding bids for all the work, workshops and the free at the point of access stuff she was wanting to do. So that's just a snapshot of trading and selling services. So I'd ask you to think, what are you physically selling to who right now? What could you be selling to people? And what are the skills that you or your team might have that might be useful and potential to sell as consultancy or wider services in the future? So that's trading. Moving on to commissioning. So I always say, commissioning is a bit like trading, but it's almost like bulk buying or wholesale. So whereas trading's often business to customer or business to business, so you're selling products and services directly to the public or to other businesses, commissioning is typically something that happens across the public, private, and also the voluntary community sector, where people commission projects, commission work. They've got a pot of funding or a chunk of money or budget to spend on specific things, and rather than buying items or events or tickets to something, they're buying outcomes usually. They want to see change. They want to see things improved as a result of them choosing to purchase and bulk buy stuff with you. And that might be events, it might be a program of training, it might be a series of employability and skills or arts, culture and heritage programs or activities. And in order to kind of pitch into this world, you do have to have a bit of a track record. You do have to get out there and network to think, who are the budget holders of what in my area? Who are the budget holders of arts and culture and heritage? Who are the budget holders of leisure and tourism? Who are the budget holders of training, skills and education? Who are the budget holders of youth support and services? These sorts of who are the budget holders for safety and environment in my area? Depending on what topics and what themes kind of chime across your interest, your impact and the way you work, there will be people out there who need social improvement, health and wellbeing improvement, educational improvement, housing and regeneration improvement. And if you're delivering some of those outcomes through the work that you do, you'll be able to think about commissioning options now or in the future. And so learning and researching who these people are and thinking about what their needs and priorities are. You can't just storm in there and say, we're running these events, we're delivering these activities, we're doing this. Because you're going in with the wrong message. You've really got to read their reports or read their websites or go and meet with them and talk to them informally on, what are they seeking to achieve, what is their budget seeking to deliver, what are the key priorities and strategic priorities with the budgets that they've got to shift, change, and you'll then be able to pitch your message and pitch your services at and aligned to what it is they're trying to achieve as well. Ultimately, you go in there seeking to make those commissioners' lives easy. If they're trying to work with young people to get them back into school and education, you tell them how you're doing that. If they're looking to increase participation in the arts or in certain types of education, you go in with that. If they're seeking to improve the environment in creative new ways, you go in with your projects and your track record of that. So it's just aligning what you do to the budgets and the commissioning priorities that are out there. And so there's some tips here on how to find these people but things to bear in mind. So certainly thinking about who's got power and influence and budget is going to be key. Thinking about your route in, it might be that there's a small bespoke commission that somebody can help you pilot or test something. It might be that you have to be of a certain size to go in and physically tender and compete for a project or for a piece of consultancy work or for a wider tender that's out that you might have to match fund or that you might have to work as a consortium in order to deliver. Sometimes, particularly starting out, going into commissioning isn't something you can do on your own. You might end up being part of this supply chain or part of a bigger piece of work where you're subcontracted to deliver an element that perhaps a larger organisation might oversee. So never write yourself off the commissioning options. There's always a way, whether it's piloting and testing and building relationships with certain types of commissioners, or working in partnership with others. But clearly, the more track record, history, and impact and ability to manage larger amounts of money that they can see, the more likely you are to secure this sort of work. Don't underestimate the additional admin and monitoring needs of some of these types of commission pieces of work, commission programs. Additional stakeholder meetings, catch up and steering group meetings, or looking at more in-depth monitoring and evaluation work often starts to kick in with the commissioned work, because there's often more people involved and more people to please than an individual client or one particular funder that we'll go on to shortly. You must try and remember, and we'll come up with this again, fully costing what you do is key in any funding or commissioned piece of work, and full cost recovery, as it's called, ensuring that the full total cost of what's being delivered is factored in, is really important. And otherwise you'll end up picking up the tab for things that you forgot to include, or for things that commissioner hadn't anticipated paying for. So being really clear about what you're tendering for, what the budget constraints and parameters are, and making sure it's worth your while is really key. It's quite hard to make a profit within commission work because every penny is accounted for. There are ways to create certain resources and certain investments, by including certain types of equipment that you might then continue to use, or by developing certain types of marketing or branding materials that you might continue to use, are ways that you can make the investment from a commission piece of work last longer than the project or the programme period. But it's not like trading, where any surpluses or any margins, profit margins that you put on there, the sky's the limit should you choose to do that. Commissioning very much to a set budget or within set parameters for specific things, and so it's just worth being aware of that. Sometimes commissioners might want to see certain types of legal structures, and they certainly want to see that you've got good, credible governance for what it is you do. You're well managed, well organised, transparent with the way you work, and ultimately having the right values and strategic fit for a particular commissioner or commissioning organisation is going to be key. There's all sorts of opportunities out there, but if you don't have the same values, you're not looking to deliver similar outcomes, or maybe even just work patterns, timing levels, or capacity-wise, you're just not the right fit, then it's not something to labour over. You need to try and consider whether it's the right opportunity at the right time with the right partners for you to look at commissioning. But I definitely recommend going having a look at some commissioning portals, as they're called. These places where you can look at what kinds of commissioning or tendering opportunities are out there. We've given a few examples of some free places to look. There are paid for sort of procurement and commissioning portals as well. But the CHEST is quite a generalist national portal where all sorts of particularly public sector commissions are shared and introduced, so that people can see what's available that you can bid in for and apply to deliver. There's all sorts of government contracts, and there's a government contract finder there. The Arts Council do have different kinds of portals where you can see what kinds of opportunities are out there, and they have some support as well to help you learn and work out how to become more commissioning ready, as does this Arts Commissioning Toolkit, the ACCT. That's a useful tool to have a look at how you can become more commissioning ready as an arts or creative organisation. So if commissioning is something that's of interest to you, you think you might be ready for it, but you've already done a few commission pieces of work and you want to grow that area of your income, look at some of those tools, look at some of those sites and see how that might work for you. So moving on to the more the sort of traditional funding and fundraising. So I'm just going to jump back. So we've looked at the top two boxes, trading and commissioning. We're now going to look at funding and fundraising. The two things are distinctly different, and fundraising and funding are often there as additional aspects that are not for private profits. Organisations can go for, whether they be community groups, charities, social enterprises, or evolving projects. And and they're additional to what any sole trader or private business might be able to look at usually. Don't get me wrong, private businesses have all sorts of funding routes and options, but we're going to be looking specifically at some of the not-for-profit and community-led and community-based type aspects. So fundraising activities, you may be doing some of this, you may have experienced some of this, whether you're running your work right now as a volunteer-led group, organisation, or entity, or whether you're not. There's all sorts of ways to generate money from the communities that you're working in to see if money or resources can be brought through. And I say resources on purpose. This isn't always about going out with a begging bowl and bringing in cash. Actually, sometimes by being more strategic and by thinking about what are our overheads, what are we spending money on, what do we need to spend money on, and how do we get this stuff in kind, or how do we get it for free, is as vital and as important as going out and trying to raise cash in that sort of same vein. So just think creatively about these things and have a think, where have you already had some success in this? Perhaps you've got ticketed events, or at events you're doing raffles or other sort of fundraising activities to bring in more income at those events. Where are you thinking about wider partnerships with local businesses or sponsorship or CSR there, as in corporate social responsibility? There are lots of businesses out in the community, whether they're linked to the arts or not, who want to be seen to be doing good. They might have community investment channels. They might have special sort of community champions who go out into communities to try and build connections for lots of different reasons. So are you utilising what community investment options, money, mentoring programs are out there to help you build relationships with private businesses? Sometimes, as I say, it can be on a in-kind, pro bono mentoring basis, can help you access all sorts of things. Might be storage space, it might be vehicles, it might be access to tools and resources, or it might be physically sponsoring and putting some cash behind an event or something that you're wanting to do, but that's another angle. You might be looking, we've got sort of e-fundraising, social media and crowdfunding are similar. Crowdfunding is through specific platforms in specific ways, and we'll come back to a slide on that shortly. E-fundraising and social media may be ways of looking for items you need, people to back campaigns, using your online and social media channels to raise awareness of the kinds of funding needs or tools, resources and equipment needs that you have. And we have included community shares and social impact bonds on there. That's fundraising at a higher level, really. If you were looking to develop assets, buildings, land, if you were needing substantial amounts of money where perhaps crowdfunding or funding alone was not going to be most helpful, but you were trying to regenerate an area or a community or work with the public sector to deliver certain types of outcomes, then community shares and social impact bonds might be something to do some research in and explore a little further. There's quite a bit more admin involved in releasing a community share issue compared to just going on crowdfund and running a crowdfund campaign. But the two things have quite different processes, but enable you to raise resources from a much wider community and at sort of higher volumes of money. And likewise, social impact bonds are ways of bringing different types of partners, and particularly public sector partners, together to invest, deliver and pay out investment in response to certain types of social impact that you create. So all food for thought, and it's all about picking the right sorts of fundraising activities that are right for you at the right time. But ultimately, it's unrestricted funds. This kind of fundraising, whether it's memberships, ticketed events, low level and smaller sort of few hundred to a few £1,000s type sponsorship or crowdfunds, through to larger amounts of money, in the thousands or tens of thousands, which are all possible through this. They're quite different in terms of what you need to do in return compared to funding, which we're going to move on to. Here, you haven't got the same level of reporting. You haven't got to fit certain sets of criteria in the main, and it's all about building relationships with people and partners and your community and the business sector, people online. And so it's a different way of generating income, money, resources that you can utilise alongside applying for things like grants. So just want to make the distinction really between fundraising, which is all of this that you don't have to have a particular legal structure for quite often, and you just get on with testing, trialing, and building relationships in your community to see what kind of funds and resources are available to help boost what you do, invite more people to get involved in what you do, and save you some cash along the way. So, funding we're going to come to. So, funding is different again. Funding is usually got some criteria. It's got some sort of goal or outcome from a particular funder who wants to invest in certain things. And there's often a form, there might be something online, there might be an interview, it might be part of a process or a program that although you get the money, they also want you to do this, this, and this. Maybe join a network, be part of a mentoring program, attend a certain number of events, be part of a peer support network. So it's a case of always read the criteria and always read the small print and check what these funders' priorities are, because it's horses for courses, and you don't want to be spending time completing funding bids that you're not really eligible for or you're not the right fit for. And we'll come back to that shortly. But what we've got here in this slide is what we're calling a sort of funding trajectories. And we've mapped these because we've mapped lots of different people we work with, and they've had all these different kinds of experiences of where do you start and where does it evolve to if you start looking at the world of funding to boost or pilot things within your income generation cocktail. So clearly the LEAP, there's a good chance that you're either applying for or you've received some funding from the LEAP to be looking at this webinar, and whether you're looking at some of their early stage investments to trial a project to get an idea off the ground, or whether you're further in to grow something or do something a bit more established, or even as a partner, one of their community and creative place partners. There's different funds that the LEAP hold to help you on your journey of either testing an idea, growing an idea, or becoming a partner to kind of cascade and evolve the LEAP model. But beyond the LEAP, you'll no doubt know from your own experience, there are other ways and other places to look for funding. Usually grant funding. Grant funding is usually something you don't have to pay back. It's an award, an investment. It's money for you to deliver what you outline in your proposal, your funding application, your bid. Different words all meaning similar things, but ultimately, along the different stages of your journey, being grant reliant is never a good idea, but using grants to test, pilot, do research and development work, expand something into a new audience that you wanted to go into or trial, taking activities, services, creating cultural art into communities that wouldn't ordinarily engage or wouldn't have the money to pay for these sorts of things, are the kinds of spaces where grant funding is really helpful, just like it's helpful at a point where you've got that track record and you're seeking to grow. And these different stages that we've lined out here are just highlighting some places to consider if you're looking for money to grow whatever it is you're doing. So in that first sort of early stage of developing, yes, the LEAP's a great place. There's also a number of other places when you're maybe not yet set up, you've not yet got much of a track record, you've probably not got accounts or 2 or 3 years of accounts, or you've not got a certain level of turnover that some funders further down the line would look for. There's still options. So Unlimited, the Foundation for Social Entrepreneurs, invest in individuals with great ideas to make positive change. The School for Social Entrepreneurs do. The Arts Council, I haven't mentioned here, but I know the Arts Council invest in individuals to develop certain professional development skills, or test things, or take things into communities. Neighbourhood funding, there's little small grants. Usually you have to be a little bit more established or have some sort of constitutional entity, but there are certain neighbourhood panels or housing associations that you can go to, even at that early stage where you're brand new, but they recognise some talent in you, but they recognise some potential in your idea, and usually somewhere in the region of £3 to £5 to £1,000 might be an option. Whereas with Unlimited and the School of Social Entrepreneurs, it's usually a good few £1,000s more than that. And the Elite obviously have got a range of funds that you can pitch in for to help grow what you do. I've also put in here funding and fundraising, because in that early stage where you haven't yet set up for something, you're testing things out, funding and fundraising and crowdfunding might be a good option for you, because you don't have to have all this red tape and all of the governance set up to go out and try and generate resources from your community. So it's a good starting point as well to think about funding and crowdfunding. There's also something called soup events. They're like little community pitching events where you can turn up to a local soup event if there's some running in your area, and you might pitch for some cash. And usually people are paid some money to attend the event, like £5 or £10, and they get something to eat or whatever. Whoever's running the event will usually match fund it to make sure that there's in the region of a few £100s that somebody can pitch for on the night. And the people who attend that event get to vote for who they'd like to see the money go to. So if you ever spot events like that, they're quite fun. They're good to connect with other people. And even if you don't win the money, you've often made a load of really useful connections. And you may be in with a chance of taking home the cash on the night. So perhaps look out for those. It then starts to evolve. Stage 2 and stage 3 are just different phases of growth, really. And the lists of potential funders or funding ideas that are there relate to where people are at in their development journey. So by the time you're at stage 2, we're saying here 1 to 3 years, you're perhaps looking at having formulated something. So although you might have tested your ideas and engaged your community and you've got some events or some activities or some regular exhibitions or whatever it is you're developing, once you've had a chance to test things out and you've decided actually we want to continue this, we think there's something to evolve here, you would formulate yourself, as we said, in a legal structure session. When you're ready, you might form a constituted group, or you might form some sort of company, limited by guarantee, limited by shares, with charity status, with kick status. There's no rush on any of these things, but by the time you got to the stage where you're looking for larger amounts of money, you need to have some sort of governance model in place, or the funders won't back you. And so there are all sorts of funds out there in the early stages, neighbourhood grants that are given out by your council for voluntary services. There'll be a Bradford CVS, other local grants through maybe your local council, through education, through arts, through housing associations. The lotteries, the National Lottery, have their first entry-level grant scheme called Awards for All, which you may have come across. Typically up to £10,000 a year. You can now apply for £20,000 in your first Awards for All, but that's usually over a 12 to 18 month or 2 year period. There's the Postcode Neighbourhood Trust, who are great and invest in communities at lots of different stages, from sort of £2,000 to £25,000 type grants. But again, they'd expect to see you having a governance model. Fundraising and crowdfunding is still there as an option to consider, sort of straddling the funding and fundraising sort of divide. And it may be that you're reaching for higher targets by stage 2, or it may be that you've got other people in your community fundraising on your behalf to free you up to get on with other things. And then finally, the sort of stage 3 that we talked about here is 3 to 5 years plus. So this list of funding options are when people are somewhat more established. They've probably got some admin and evaluation capabilities. You usually need to have some good impact evidence and track records, and almost a higher level skill set in bid writing to be able to go for some of these sorts of funds. But There's lots of funding out there, whether it be, again, the LEAP, who look for partners to grow and cascade their model. You've got something called the Workers' Education Alliance, who often distribute enterprise employability and skills or lifelong learning skills money. And their grant agreements can be useful to go for after you've been running a few years to build skills in your community that you're doing already. The lottery have their regional communities partnership bids, which are more substantial by the time you look 3 to 5 years plus and going for large amounts of money to perhaps cover 2 to 3 years core funding to grow. And then there's a list there. I won't kind of go through those, but lots of routes to research to think who might align most with the kinds of investment or grant funding that we might need, depending on whether you lean into community regeneration or dealing with inequalities in the community, or building health and wellbeing, sports, or mental health improvement, or anything else. So just an example there of where things can start and where things can grow to if you have got a great concept with some really innovative and interesting activities, programs, events, exhibitions, consultancy, whatever it is you're doing. There's not only trading and commissioning funding routes, but fundraising routes, like funding will often be a key part of your income generation model to test things out, to get things moving, to help you reach into communities and deliver all sorts of impact that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. And offer things usually free at the point of access with some of these funding options. And help build your products and services that you may then sell in a traded or commission capacity in future. So this was just some tips really on funding, how not to write a funding bid. Often people try and write these things, and you can pay people to write bids for you, but it can be expensive. Certainly the funders would prefer, particularly in the early years, the funders would prefer that you write these things yourself, because it's you who knows your organisation best, and quite often it's you that they want to hear from, and it's you they want to invest in. So these are just some tips on how not to do this. So certainly, don't go in blind. Make sure that you read the criteria, as I was saying earlier. You can waste an awful lot of time writing funding bids when you've not fully read what it is they will and won't fund, and you're busy writing what it is you want to do, which bears no resemblance to what they'll actually fund, either in terms of items and expenditure or in terms of the types of activities they want to see. So really do read the FAQs and the eligibility criteria thoroughly, because that's what they'll be scoring you against. This going in cold. So don't go in cold. Basically, if you're requesting more than about 20,000, it's more than likely that there'll be someone to talk to test the water. This is basically all about building a relationship with that funder. Whether it's more than 20,000, less than. If you can get hold of somebody, talk to somebody, sound them out about what you're wanting to do, not only does it help you better understand what it is they're likely to fund and whether you're a good fit, but it also puts you in the back of their mind so that when they're reading these applications or they're making decisions around the table, they've got a bit more information about you and what you do and what your track record and goals and vision are. So yeah, don't go in with the wrong governance or track record. So some funders will want to see certain types of governance. Most will. 90% of funders expect you to be something, whether it's a constituted group with a minimum of 3 non-related people, or some sort of company or charity that again has a minimum of 3 non-related directors or trustees. Go back and have a look at the governance webinar if you want to learn more about that. But yeah, they will say what they will and won't fund. Some funders will only fund charities, and so if you're set up as a company limited by guarantee without charitable status, or you set up as a KIC, they may not fund you, and vice versa. There's all sorts of criteria that they will have put down, and so having a good read on what are they expecting you to be. They're certainly highly unlikely to fund somebody who's a sole trader or an individual, and so although there are a few that will, the chances are if you've not formed something yet as a kind of group organisation, you may not have the governance model that some of the larger funders or mainstream funders would fund. And clearly they're looking at, have you got the ability to deliver what you're saying? And they'll be looking at your track record for that. Depending on where you've come from and whether you've written these types of funding bids before, you'll know what I mean when I say, don't burn the midnight oil, because it can be exhausting applying for funding. Funders often, give very tight deadlines. There's a window to apply. It often feels like it's not long enough, or you're rushing. You've only just found out about it. It's 2 days till the deadline. Just weigh up: is it worth the time? Is it worth the effort? And will it have you up till 2, 3 in the morning trying to get this thing done? When you've got all sorts of other things that you need to do the following day. Just weighing these things up. We're saying how not to write a funding bid: cut and paste. Do you or don't you cut and paste information and content from a previous bid into something else? We would say probably not. Everybody does, and everybody will have sort of stock information that they might cut and paste. So things that are about your mission and vision and who you are as an organisation, or your accounts, for example, or your turnover of last year. Things like that aren't going to change. So there's certain key information, as we'll come to in a moment, that are cut and pasteable. It's the same information, whoever's asking, but more often than not, every funder will have slightly different criteria or slightly different questions, and so just simply cutting and pasting in a rush, any funder will know and will see if you've just slapped in some information from a past bid, because it just may not correlate to the question that's being asked, or it may not fully answer or give enough detail as to what's really being asked in their application form. So I would cut and paste with caution. So how not to write for a bid: ignore your competition or ignore who the funder has previously backed. So it's worth doing a little bit of research just to see. They'll more often than not be telling you who they've invested in before, and do some of those places and organisations look and feel like you? Do you look like you're the sort of organisation that this funder is going to want to back and invest in? It's also helpful because knowing who your competition is can also help you spot who additional partners and allies are, and help spot learning from organisations doing things similarly or differently. So, it's worth having a look at who they've backed before. I talked earlier about full cost recovery, but yeah, if how not to write a funding bid: ignore full cost recovery, go bankrupt, or go unpaid. Basically, if you don't fully cost out your projects and know how to budget properly, and don't include unforeseen costs and all those other elements that need to be in there, you could go bankrupt or you could go unpaid. That's the point. And so if that's resonating with you and you've got some nervousness around putting budgets together, do have a look at the webinar on that that's been created for you to help think through budgeting and cash flow and putting together appropriate cost of things. Ignore your pestle, basically, is what this is all about. So political, economic, social, technological, local and environmental context. So what this means is any funder and commissioner will have a set of priorities that they're looking to invest in. They want to make change around, and they're weighing up the level of change they want to make, the level of risks they want to make, and any funders wants to know that you're understanding the context in which you operate. Are you the best bet for them to put their investment in, whether it's a grant or a piece of commission work or anything else? And so really doing some research, whether it's through a business plan or whether it's just through a pestle report, to help think through what's the political context and risks and connotations, what is policy saying about the way and the importance of your work right now, how are you addressing economic inequalities, and how does your sector or the industry that you work in operate right now in the current economic climate, and what are the risks attached? Socially speaking, how are you investing back in society, and what's the I guess the public will and the public want for what you're doing right now? Technologically, are there risks and opportunities associated with what you're doing right now, and how do you relate to that? How do you respond to that? And local and environmental context is just thinking, what is local policy or local priorities, and the environmental sort of context for the work that you're doing. Initially, when you're just starting out a project, you're just having a go, getting stuff done and seeing if the community responds and seeing what the impact is and how things evolve. But as you grow, really understanding the wider context in which you operate, and having the answers for those funders and commissioners or investors or whoever to really answer certain questions around why they should back you and how you know and understand your context is going to be quite key. So that's why we mention it in here now, particularly if you're going for larger funding bids, that will become critical to set your unique case for why you should be invested in and backed right now. Assuming that you're unique with the best solution, the best ideas going. So everybody thinks like that. I've sat on lots of funding panels and grant assessment panels, and people always say there's nothing like ours, there's nothing like us. It's a bit like going back to your competition and ignoring your competition. There's always competition, whether you think there is or not. You've just not thought broadly enough if you think there's no competition. Yes, put out what's unique and distinct about what you do. Yes, put out impact data and stats and information around why what you're doing is, creating the best impact and giving some really unique experiences or impact. But do recognise what's going on around you, because it won't impress a funder or a commissioner if you operate in isolation or can't see the wood for the trees. Commissioners and grant funders are funding things all the time. So all of the people and all of the things that you invest in your competition to some degree is just working out why you're niche, distinct and unique, and the right organisation at the right time to be able to pitch to that particular grant round or that grant fund that year to seek to secure some investment funds. So just be aware, do talk about your competition, do talk about what else is going on, do talk about who you're working in partnership with, because that all helps a funder or a commissioner to see you're grounded, you're aware, and you're embedded and working collaboratively, which all works in your favour. Word counts, certain funders, many funders will have very frustrating word counts. 150 words, 300 words, who knows? And you also have to become an artist in crafting paragraphs sometimes. And so this point is about, don't go over the word count, but on the flip side, don't write one word or one sentence answers. It's getting that happy medium to be able to answer the question with the right number of words, getting the right points across. If you go over word count, things get kicked out, or you can't continue, or they'll mark you down. So just something to be aware of, and get help maybe. If writing these things isn't your forte, maybe English isn't your first language, there'll be people around, might be people on your project team, people on your board or steering group, or however you're running things, that can work together on these things. And how not to write funding bid. Don't forget or underestimate the funding requirements and reporting expectations. I mentioned this before about commissioners, but funders, lots of funders, unlike fundraising, where you're, out raising funds and raising resources, as I described before, with the business community, fundraising events, and the money's your own, and you don't have to report back to people in quite the same way. This funding that you apply for will have requirements, and is there a quarterly report? Have you got to report back to the monthly? What kind of meetings have you got to have? What kind of records have you got to keep? How are they expecting you to evaluate this thing, or are they leaving you to it? There's things that you need to work out to check that it's worth your while in the first place to go forward. So it's going to be too onerous. You may not want to do that. So that's how not to write a funding bid. I did say before about don't cut and paste, but this is just a top tip really. We found over the years that working with people to help them write funding bids, having key information to hand helps them not burn the midnight oil and try and find where this information is. And it also helps you delegate this task, so as you might have some volunteers or a management committee or a board, or you might have people that can help you with things. If this information is all to hand, then it doesn't have to be you that writes this bid. Somebody else can start it off, and you can review it and finish it off. So we suggest that you have, if you have a company number, like a charity number, company or KIC, they'll all have a number that you get asked for, and your address or addresses that you operate from, postcodes that you operate from, having that down, having key information together about who the lead applicant is, having little bits of potted information about any directors, trustees, team names, contact details and biographies. Sometimes they'll ask for different information about one or two people in the team, or they want to know who you are, who's delivering this thing. If you've got to the point yet where you've developed a kind of vision, mission, key services or key activities that you're delivering and repeating, understanding what your purpose is and the social issue that you're seeking to address. Maybe you might have that in a theory of change or a business model canvas. We talked about these in previous webinars. Having this information to hand means that you've got some content ready to adapt and evolve within the context of whatever questions are being asked in a funding bid or a commissioning option. Certain funders will want to see different 2-3 years of accounts. So even if you're early stage and you haven't got those yet, having an income and expenditure sheet, or knowing where you can get hold of your accounts, if you need to attach them, last year's accounts to a certain funding bid. They'll also often ask for bank details at the point of application sometimes. So again, having those all down in one file or one folder is just helpful to have to hand. Some funders that you may go for, and this is when you're 2 or 3 years down the line maybe, they might want to see certain types of policy documents, or they'll ask you if you have them. So have you got a health and safety policy, equality, diversity and inclusion policy, volunteer safeguarding, GDPR sustainability? There's a set of key policies that any funder would expect you to have in place, so that you're following your due diligence, as they call it, and you're governing what you're doing well, and you're aware of your roles and responsibilities and obligations to manage your organisation if you're involved into that. So it's not something to worry about. These things can be created over time, at the right time, and more often than not, you can Google health and safety policy or EDI policy, or go and talk to your local CVS, or the LEAP potentially is evolving, example policy documents that you can adapt and adopt as your own. But there's something to prepare to respond to funders in the future. They'll often want to see you've got certain types of insurance in place, so having your insurance certificates together. You might start to do some social impact measurement or social value measurement work, and there's another webinar that you'll be able to look at if you need some support or information around that. But having that social value or evaluation work, impact data there, you've then got content to be able to respond to certain funders. So if they're asking questions, or they're wanting to see impact in education and skills, or young people that people work with, or health improvement, your social impact or evaluation work that you've done will hopefully have evidence of outcomes in some of these areas, and you'll be able to say, of the 50 people we worked with in the last year, 80% of them said this, or 70% of them went on to do this. So it's just this sorts of information, and having it to hand, whilst it can take a little bit of time to build, all helps you respond to a funding bid that's come out. You really want to go for, there's only so many hours in a day. If you've got the content there that you can piece together, or somebody else can make a start on, it all helps. I mentioned before about PESEL reports, but yes, some written descriptions around how what you do responds and manages risk in certain areas, or how the work that you're doing links to policy need, and just having a think about, in a local, national or regional context, why is the work that you're doing important, and who says it's important, and where's the sound bites from different sectors or different agencies that outlines the problem and outlines the budget spend and outlines the need for for the year or for the period. Having access to this information all helps you build a better evidence case to be able to say, we know that 1 in 4 people in the UK experience mental health problems. We know that it costs, don't quote me, £30,000 to keep, somebody in the prison system for so long, or whatever area of work you're working in, looking at what the costs are involved in what it is you're doing, and the fact that you're actually potentially saving the public purse, you're saving taxpayers' money's costs by offering the services that you do. All of these sorts of policy information and detailed data eventually can help you build a stronger case for saying, back us now, and we can create all sorts of preventative services or all sorts of regeneration work that means that we never get to the point where, wider money, wider risks, wider problems occur. So that's the point on that. Clearly, if you've written some funding bids before, or as you start to do this stuff, whilst you're not going to want to cut and paste them like for like, having access to previous bid content, as we've called it, that you can adapt and amend and repurpose, will save you or save people helping you some time, particularly if you're applying for similar types of projects, similar types of things, or certain things are not going to change. Then having that to hand is really helpful. Also, don't forget your online presence. So sometimes the funders might ask, how are you engaging with your communities? How are you marketing and promoting what you do? And just having a little snapshot or a little overview of where you're actively promoting things, how you're working online, the numbers of followers that you have on certain things, what works best. Having this together just all helps you or others respond to these bids that come out, and as we all know, they often don't give you long enough to go for these things. So the more information you have to hand to prepare, the easier it gets when you start looking at going for these things, whether it's for a few £1,000s or £10,000 or £50,000 or £100,000. Saving yourself time by having this stuff together all really helps as you evolve and you grow. So if you're just starting out, don't panic and don't think, oh my goodness, where do I get all this from? It evolves and it builds over time. But hopefully this little checklist here, will start to help you think, oh, well, I can put these things together because I know we've got that. And maybe these are some of the things we need to look to evolve in the future. And certainly your LEAP development managers and other people supporting LEAP networks will be able to support some of this stuff and answer questions and signpost you to places like CVS's or wider enterprise support or certain national agencies that might be useful for you to kind of gather data from. So just, something to bear in mind, whilst it says good vibes only, and that's true, nobody wins every bid they ever go for. It's just the way of the world. And so, what do we do when we get rejected? It can be frustrating. It can be have you on a knife edge, and it can be a real worry. But with good planning, with a really good income generation cocktail, you've not got all your eggs in one basket. So it shouldn't be, the end of an era. It's just another evolving step in developing what you do. And ultimately, as it says here, don't take it personally. There's these funding bid pots are often highly competitive with thousands and thousands of people going for the money when they can only offer so many grants and awards. So it's certainly not personal. Do seek feedback. Not all funders have the time or will give feedback, but where you can get it or where they've given it in a rejection letter, you can bear that in mind and you can take that on board and you can phone them for further clarification and these sorts of things. Do call and email the funder before you reapply, just to check A, that you can, B, that it's worth your while, and as part of that feedback gathering. But people often can get a bit grumpy and disgruntled if they don't know whether we've not been funded. Oh, well, we'll leave that then, and that's fine. But actually, often you were like minuscules of points or almost within getting that funding. It was a competitive round, or there were other people who had stronger proposals at that point. And so, or there were certain things you needed to take into consideration, or bits missing, or whatever it might be. And actually, reapplying to a funder you've been rejected from is potentially better than going to a brand new funder, because unless they've said you can't apply again for a year or you're just not the right fit, then fair enough. But you've done all that groundwork in the first place. Sometimes it's worth reapplying to the same funder. We've been rejected. My organisation, Flourish Together, has been rejected from the lottery before now, but we reapplied and then we got the resources. Same goes to the postcode lottery. Highly oversubscribed every month. Very short time frame to get the bid in. It took us about 3 goes to get that, but we got it in the end. So don't underestimate reapplying to a funder that you've been rejected from. It may be worth your while. Other things, other suggestions, as we were saying before, not doing it all on your own, getting colleagues, peers, and other people to review, critique, give feedback can be helpful. As we said, rehash and reuse that content. And you've often written a good bid, it just didn't get over the line because it was a stronger proposal. So do think about how to reuse and repurpose project ideas and budgets or information that you've put together before. And as we keep saying in this webinar, develop a wider income generation strategy. It's really important that you have a sort of multiple income stream. And what we'll also say, as much as you can go for grants and so on, actually going to build a market in other ways, selling to people directly or selling to commissioners or various budget holders builds relationships in ways where you can go back and they become a customer and an ongoing repeat customer. Whereas burning the midnight oil, writing funding bids, which are highly competitive, isn't something you should, only focus on, because it has, huge risks attached. And as it says here, building your market and either fundraising or selling to the public can bring other wider benefits directly with your community or create that repeat business and that repeat user involvement. So all the more reason to not have all your eggs in one basket and use the thinking behind this multiple income generation cocktail. Just finally, was just to reiterate a little bit about crowdfunding. So this is all part of a fundraising strategy or a fundraising element. Would crowdfunding be useful for you? It sort of straddles, fundraising and investment, and it's in the main it's unrestricted funds. A lot of the crowd funds sites, you raise your money, and if you win that money and you hit the targets and you get the money's yours to deliver, spend, do. There are some that have slight criteria aspects or slight reporting aspects, but in the main, it's less onerous than going for grant funding or commissioning, in terms of less strings attached to what you can do with it. This is just highlighting that crowdfunding has definitely been a growing part of our UK's business landscape, and particularly in the social economy as well as the private business sector. Large amounts of money are now being invested through crowdfunding platforms. And there's research out there through Crowdfunder, which is more of a not-for-profit platform, that you could go and find probably more up-to-date research in this. We just highlighted some of the more not-for-private profit crowdfunding sites here. There are lots of others that are focused on private businesses and private investment, but arts, culture, community-led initiatives will often look at Crowdfunder. Kickstarter is often there for a mixture of private, freelancer, and sort of new idea, product, film, media development. Indiegogo is another one. Space Hive is almost like a place-based crowdfunding platform. Just Giving and Local Giving are more sort of charitable, smaller scale crowdfunding investments that people look for. But whether you've used these sites before or whether you haven't, it's something to consider as a way to bring in relatively few strings attached resources. What's useful with these opportunities is you really build awareness. So you have to go on a site, log in, and register what it is you're going to do and how. And what I would say with crowdfunding is there's a handful of golden rules to this. And you have to have a crowd to go to in the first place. Lots of people try and crowdfund too soon and they fail because there wasn't a crowd to go to. They expected this money to just land from somewhere, but there's an awful lot of planning and strategy that goes into a successful crowdfunding campaign, and they really need to be thought through. So yes, your golden rules are doing your research into who else and what else is being funded through this site, having a look at what crowdfunding campaigns are landing well, and usually they're clearly thought through, they've got good short, sharp videos or imagery of what people are backing and investing in, they're playing to the heartstrings or the mindset or the culture of the community that they're seeking to raise investment from and backing from. They'll often have some targets. So usually between sort of 5 to 8 weeks is a typical window for running a crowdfunding campaign. A, so that you don't exhaust yourself doing it, and B, so that people are kind of watching and the pressure's on basically to put your money in now or don't. But this is the deadline. Those sort of all or nothing campaigns, they're called, can be quite useful to force people to pledge now and put their money where their mouth is now. You can leave them to kind of roll for longer, or you can leave them to raise what you take what you raise. But in terms of hitting certain types of targets, those that secure larger amounts of money or have a focused approach tend to do better than ones that just get left, because you have to really be on the case 24/7, marketing, promoting, and bringing in people to back your campaign. And more often than not, a large number of people who back your campaign will be people who directly know you, unless you've hitting on a particular national nerve, or you've got on TV in some way, or you've got celebrity backing, or some sort of endorsement that takes what you're doing to a wider stratosphere or audience. More often than not, it's who you know who'll be backing this campaign. So don't underestimate that. And the other quick golden rule on this is you do all the legwork before you even launch the crowdfund. So you do a lot of the talking and letting people know what you're doing and asking them to back you and pledge what they can before you even launch, because the golden rule is you should have 10 or 20% of your total in the first week, because success breeds success and crowdfunds roll like snowballs. And so getting everybody to pledge, who you would hope would be what they call early adopters at the start, means that when people are looking at your campaign, whether it's Joe Public, your community, politicians, the council, somebody with a larger budget to back this thing, they need to see that there's a want and a will, and it's moving. So that's something we learned early on. I've run 4 successful crowdfunding campaigns and helped about 12 organisations raise over £400,000. So there's certain golden rules to this stuff, and that is key. So yes, we would wish you well with that. We would say do your research, but don't underestimate it as an option in the tool bag of income generation. Last but not least, the section in the middle, the diamond in the middle, you'll see, it's investment, social investment. And this isn't for everybody, and it certainly isn't for you if you're just starting out. But we would put it in there so that it's something to think about for the future, and it's another element of your income generation cocktail. So investments, there's a couple of different kinds. Loan investment, which is the majority of this lot, or loan investment or equity investment. And these are people or organisations who will invest in your organisation and or outcomes. And as it says, there are some organisations that are all about investment readiness, to help you get to the point where you could be investable. So that's all about kind of business planning and getting your what they call due diligence in place and making sure that you're an investable organisation. And there's less risk attached to backing you. Then there are all sorts of investment funds. There might be social investment funds, there might be specialised funds, and then there's all kinds of loans, and social impact bonds are included here. We just put that there as to kind of hold on to or to reflect back on. There'll be places local to you, but there are also national, a lot of these are national organisations. So if you think that a social investment loan or finding investment partners may be something that you want to do in future, this is something to discuss further with Philippe, with wider people in your local area, and look up if there are options for you. So we didn't want to leave this out just because a lot of the projects might be early stage. It's something to sort of put in your plans for the future. So considering routes to support and finance, you can go and get access to further support on all sorts of information about grants, about investment, about funds, about commissioning in lots of different places. And we'd say certainly don't forget routes to support are local, regional, national, and sectoral. And there's all sorts of forms of support out there. And we've given the names here, and I'm going to read all these out, but certainly locally to you, there's, as we keep saying, the types of councils, voluntary services and enterprise support, housing associations, universities, art networks. There'll be people who've got access to support and money or connections to other opportunities, so seek them out. There are all sorts of regional options, and we've named a couple there, but you'll have to do your own research in and around your regional area to see what's about. There's certainly lots of national routes to finance and support, whether that's for funding or whether that's for investment. So doing research at a national level at a time that's right for you will be helpful, particularly, Arts Council again, obviously a national organisation. And just because it's about community-led culture and arts and heritage, don't forget all the other added benefits that you're creating. So it might be that you've got arts and health initiatives, it might be that you're working with young people, it might be that there's a digital aspect to what you do, but combining where you seek support cross-sector is also something to bear in mind, and map out which organisations and funders could be helpful to you as a sort of indirectly or as a wider partner. So we're on the homeward stretch here. Just a quick reminder, trading, selling products and services. Trading is often a taxable type of income, but with trading, the benefits are you get to choose how you spend the income, you get to choose what you do with the surpluses. Commissioning is often there to meet a commissioner's brief or a tender specification or brief. You're often delivering a proposal rather than just doing what you would not ordinarily do. Something has to be tailored to meet those outcomes and deliver those outcomes. Often there's a predetermined budget, as I mentioned, and you're working to that budget if that's appropriate. As we said, whereas with trading, there isn't the same level of reporting other than doing your accounts. There isn't all the evaluation and reporting back to a commissioner on how you are and aren't hitting those targets and outcomes. So there's an additional aspect there. Commission will usually be taxable as an income source once you hit that sort of threshold. We talked about funding and fundraising and the differences about that. So fundraising, it might be donations of cash, of goods, of services, of in-kind time. It's non-taxable, it's donation. If you're a charity and you're fundraising, then you'll be eligible for gift aid. So do look into that. That's an additional 20% on top of the donations given. With fundraising, again, you can choose how you spend that money. There's not strings attached to what you have to do with it. Funding, as I said before, not putting all your eggs in one basket and making sure that you don't become funding reliant and that you use funding for starting up, innovating something in a new way, doing research and development is often the way to use funding, test, trial, pilot, to then grow an idea that is then commissionable or tradable, is a useful sort of line of planning. There is funding out there for core funds, what they call core funding, that might cover some of your core costs, your overheads, your salary core team for a period of time, but they're short term, they're only here and there and are highly competitive. And so having this multiple route to money will be key in any growing organisation. Funding is usually non-taxable, clearly you're taxed to the point of spending that money, but it's been given in kind, it's been given as a gift, somewhat donated to you. And rather than you selling services to the funder, you're delivering outcomes to that funder through a not-for-profit grant agreement. So usually it's not taxable, and there's often a predetermined budget. You'll be saying how much you're applying for and exactly what you're going to spend that money on. And although there might be a little bit of wriggle room or some things that you can juggle around in consultation with your funder, there's a set amount of money that you'll be using and spending, and there's additional reporting back to that funder in terms of maybe a report or certain case studies, or reporting monthly figures on impact or whatever it might be, depending on who the funder is and the size of them and all that. So that's your recap. Lastly, the social finance and investment we touched on briefly at the end. There's loan investment, there's equity investment, sometimes there's what they call blended investment, which might be like a grant loan mix. But there's always a payback period, whereas grants you don't pay back. Social loans or social finance you do pay back, and usually there'll be a predetermined budget, but there'll also be additional reporting and quite a heavy level of scrutiny around your due diligence. Are you an investable? Will they get a return on their investment, and how can they guarantee that is going to be key to them? In addition to some social outcome that they want to see, more often than not, it's will they get their money back is a key factor for some of those social finance organisations. So, just thinking about as you grow, this is just a reminder of how and where to use this money. Where does it all fit together? And it's just although we've touched on this slide is just sort of physically laying out that when you're trading is good to test. When you're at an early stage, you test trading, and you're creating what they call a minimum viable product. So you're testing what you do, you're piloting what you do, and you're creating repeatable product, services, and activities through your trading to see what's sustainable and what's not. When you're at a growth stage of trading, that means that you're getting repeat sales, or you're getting scaled orders, or you're growing bigger programs, or maybe whatever you've been running in for one audience or for one client group, you suddenly then can start to grow and scale in a new market. So there's different ways that trading can be put into place, whether you're early stage or whether you're growing, and just thinking about what stage are you at and where do you want to take your tradable things. Likewise, the commissioning is relevant for early and growth stage projects and people. So if you're at an early stage, maybe you, rather than being commissioned to do some big commission or some big piece of work or some big program with lots of red tape and lots of reporting, it may be that actually securing, a 3 to 5 to 10K research project or consultation project or pilot project is the best way to get into commissioning. Maybe you're not eligible yet, or you've not got the track record to go for what's being asked to be commissioned or to be tenderable to do something, but that's no reason not to talk to people with budgets and commissions to say, we do this great stuff, we could deliver some of the outcomes that you need to see, but we're not in a position yet to go for the larger commissioning opportunities. Would you work with us? Would you consider backing us to reach the communities that you can't, deliver some of the outcomes that you can't, show how things need to change and be innovative in new ways? And there's money from commissioners to be able to test and research and consult, so that may be a foot in. But if you are at a stage where you're growing or you're working in partnership with others, then going for larger commissions, repeat contracts, procurement is the stage that you'd be at in terms of what you're looking to do. On the funding and fundraising side, at that early stage point, it might be that running some ad hoc events or some one-off fundraising activities is what you're ready to do. But then as you grow, fundraising might change, and rather than shaking buckets in AFDA or going doing some ad hoc small bits of fundraising, you may then scale your requests you're scaling the amount that you're asking for, or you might look for particular sponsor partners or people to make particular donations, or you might find that you need a dedicated, fundraising role if that's going to be a key facet of your income generation strategy, because it takes time and it takes a lot of coordination. So it's something to think about on the fundraising side. And then with funding, like with all the others, at early stage and growth stage, it's something that you will be able to think about. Early stage is clearly the small grants, project funding, testing things out, giving things a go, innovating things in communities. But then as you start to grow, you might then look for more like 2 to 5 year grants, if they even exist now. Looking at that core funding model and seeing if you can strengthen the operations and the capacity of your core. Going in for partnership bids or larger consortium bids, and looking at how you access funding to grow programs or develop particular relationships, strategic relationships to then grow how you secure funding for the future, is all key. On the social finance and investment side, that early stage point is really all about becoming ready. Is it suitable for most people, for most organisations? Going for loans and equity investment isn't relevant, and it isn't what you need to do. But for certain organisations who might operate more on a sort of private sector footing, or they might be set up as a company to buy shares, or they may be taking on assets or a building and need hundreds of thousands of pounds quickly, you might be growing and need a kind of bridging loan to kind of evolve. Then fair enough, but more often than not, it's the other parts of this cocktail that are relevant. That said, for those that need it, becoming investment ready really is the early stage aspect of this. And then as you grow, when you're ready for social investment, you're looking at loans or equity investment, and all of the work that goes in behind the scenes to secure that as well. So hopefully that's given you a very thorough, a lot of information around income generation options, but you'll know in your heart of hearts where you're at, what feels most relevant for you, but it's hopefully giving you some food for thought for the future as well. And a good way of analysing other organisations to think, well, where are they getting their money from? And I wonder, to what aspect are they trading or being commissioned, and to what aspect are they using funding and fundraising methods to grow and evolve what they do. So, use this information how you need, and use it to help plan and think about your short-term, long-term needs and who else needs to be involved to help you get there. I mentioned at the start that there was a tool, and if you haven't downloaded it already, this is what it looks like. So get the tool or doodle this out and start to have a think if you haven't been doing along the way, what are you currently trading? Who's buying your stuff now? Whatever, it might be tickets, it might be t-shirts, it might be pieces of art, it might be paying for a workshop, whatever it might be. Who's trading now? Who's commissioning you now? Where and how are you fundraising? Where and how are you accessing funding and social finance if that's appropriate? But this also gives you the chance to think, what might you like to be doing in the future? And this then gives you a chance to check in with your peers, network with other people at LEAP events and other things to see how are they doing this, and talk to your community development managers to think about their thoughts and reviewing your work and what it is you're doing and what the potential is for growing your income and sustainability. So, a long one this one, but there's a lot to pack in there. Hopefully that has been helpful. Just consider which income generation options are going to make the best cocktail for you. By analysing what you're doing now, thinking about the potential for the future, that should help you progress in that way. Thinking about new ways other than being reliant on funding, as we've discussed, is going to be key. And as we said, don't get disheartened or take it personally if you aren't successful with bids or anything else. Think about the feedback, think about using the learning, and definitely try again and try other options. And take the leap. We wish you luck in your income generation options and development and growing what you do, and look forward to watching the progress. Thanks for listening.